happy birthday to me. Yes, it was my birthday this week as I lurch forward irrevocably into my 7th decade. And, well, welcome to Richard Bey Talk. I'm here with my whippersnapper producer, a young man, even though he looks like Father Christmas.
Wait till it changes. You'll see. I took 20 years off.
Albert Reinoso, who
Hello.
is, what are you? You're 2 decades younger than me, right? What generation were you?
1 decade.
Oh, 1 decade.
Yeah.
Okay. All right. So
11 to 12 years.
I'm still a baby boomer. Were you still a baby boomer?
I think I'm just right on the cusp.
Oh, okay. All
Yeah.
right. So 2 baby boomers here broadcasting. And yes, it was my birthday this week. And July 1951, there was a book that was first published that probably every American boy read in elementary school or junior high school. And every American boy identified with the major protagonist, who was a kid who spoke out against the phonies in American society and the artificial nature of American society. And July 1951, the day that book was published, well, actually not the day, but the month that book was published, that was the month that I was born. And of course, the book is Catcher in the Rye. Now, when you read it as a kid, you see Holden Caulfield as a hero. I read it a few years ago as an adult, and he seems sort of whiny and immature and self-absorbed and solipsistic. And, but it begins, and this has always struck me, it begins, the first sentence is, if you really want to hear about it. And I think that first sentence is, like, to me, genius. Now, bear with me. Because in a way, he's saying, you can sense there's a desire to tell his story. That he has an urge to describe what has happened to him. And at the same time, he doesn't want to impose upon you, or he doesn't want to make it appear that he's imposing upon you. So he says, if you really want to hear about it, so it's your choice to listen to it. Of course, at the end of the story, you realize that he's in a psychiatric hospital after a nervous breakdown. And I think it's his brother who's a psychiatrist. Anyway, so I always identified with that, because in a way I say the same thing to you. If you really want to hear about it, listen to Richard Bey Talk. Subscribe, pass it on to your friends. But I hate selling it or imposing it upon you. So if you really want to hear about it, do those things. Subscribe and pass it on to your friends, and don't ever miss an episode. Okay, so I don't think I'm Holden Caulfield, but on your birthday, I mean, Albert sent me a message on my birthday about going forward and living in the moment. But, at this stage of life, on my birthday, you look back, and maybe you do too if you're older, and think about the choices you made that led you to where you are today. And you think about, people who are gone. My mother, every birthday, would come to me and describe my birth at 2:38 in the morning and how difficult it was. And I was born in a hospital called St. Joseph's Hospital. And my mother would always, the nuns came in and said, Mrs. Bey, look, you have a little prize fighter, because I had these big pudgy hands. And of course, when I grew up, I did box a little bit, but I was never any good at it. And of course, my father, who passed away soon after my mother, and it was very difficult for him. And my father would always say to me, where I am you will be. And my mother would always say, especially when she was getting out of the car, she would go, don't get old, Richard, don't get old. And my father would say, where I am, you will be. And so you tend to think of that as you get closer to your father's age in old age. My father passed away at 82, but years before that, he started to develop Alzheimer's, and it's something I always worry about. When that started to happen, I made a pledge to myself that I would never let a month go by where I didn't spend 10 days with my father, either in Florida where he lived or in New York. And there was a point in time he'd call me 5-6 times a day. I know he was lonely. My mother was gone. And I'd say, well, what did you have for dinner? And he said, oh, I went to Costco and they have all these free things that you can eat. I said, Dad, that's not dinner. So I called restaurants in Florida and had them deliver food. And every night I'd call them and say, do you want Italian? Do you want Chinese? Do you want a sandwich? So I'd have food delivered to him. And eventually, it, of course, took him away. But before that happened, I realized he needs something to move forward, just the way I need something to move forward. And in some ways, this podcast gives it to me. I'm accomplishing something. And I think the podcasts are getting better and better. I mean, Pablo Casal, one of the world's greatest musicians, was asked at the age of 92, why do you still perform? Why do you still practice? And Pablo Casal said, because I can perceive improvement. And I think these podcasts have improved. But anyway, for my dad, he used to go to the movies all the time. So I thought up this thing to have him join me on the radio show and every week do movie reviews. Now, I couldn't keep up with him because he had seen so many movies, but his reviews were interesting. He had a deal with the movie theater manager, that if he didn't like the movie, he could come out and complain and get his money back. Eventually, the manager said, listen, this is the deal now. You have 20 minutes. If you don't like the movie, you come out. I'll give you your money back. But if you're in there past 20 minutes, you're not getting a refund. But every week, my father would go to the movies, write down his reviews, write down what he saw, and he would look forward to Dick and Dad go to the movies. And I'm so proud that we had that time together. And I'm so blessed to have it on audio. Listen to this.
News Talk Radio 77, WABC.
Down in Delray Beach, Florida, there isn't much to do but go to the Early Bird Special and go to the movies. And that's just what Dick Bey Sr. does every week. He sees everything. He doesn't eat everything at the Early Bird Special, but he sees every movie. So on Saturdays, he can talk to his son as Dick and Dad go to the movies.
Hello, Dad, are you there?
I am here.
Hey, I'm sorry to keep you going. We had a long discussion here today, so sorry to keep you holding on. How's the weather in Florida?
Very beautiful.
Boy, you saw so many movies this week.
Yes, and I'm going to tell you about them quickly because I know you haven't much time.
No, I got time. We can talk about them. You saw one yesterday that everybody wants to see, the phone booth.
The one that I saw yesterday was the phone booth with Colin Farrell.
Oh, boy. Yeah, we haven't got much time. Time is all we got. At one point, he hadn't seen his youngest brother in about 30 years, and he said, I'd really like to see Jerome. So I put him in the car, and I said, we could drive up to New Hampshire, to Manchester, and see your younger brother. And we did. And this was in the later stages of his deterioration in Alzheimer's. And at one point, we're on the road, And I'm on the highway, and all of a sudden he reaches out and grabs my arm. And I said, Dad, I'm going 65 miles an hour on the freeway. What are you doing? And he just looked at me and he said, you're a good son. And, you know, I'll always remember that, and I'll always be proud of that. And I'm glad I made that commitment to spend time with him. Now, someone who may not have much time left in the House of Representatives is Liz Cheney, who has been just remarkable on the January 6th committee. I mean, the irony of this is that her father was probably the biggest manipulator of the truth in the 21st century. Well, I know Trump is bigger, but her father certainly came on and said Mohammed Atta was in Prague, and that Saddam Hussein was close to getting a nuclear bomb, and that he was harboring terrorists. There were so many things. That WMD is here. It's it's under the sands. It's in the palaces, and yet she has turned out to be someone, at least in this instance, with integrity, intelligence, patriotism, and she may lose her job for it. Now, she was on with Jake Tapper, and he almost hectored her about it. Well, you're going to lose. You're going to lose your seat in Wyoming because of what you've done. And if you wake up the day after Election Day and you have lost your representation in the House, how are you going to feel about that? This is what she said.
I am working hard here in Wyoming to earn every vote. But I will also say this, I'm not going to lie. I'm not going to say things that aren't true about the election. My opponents are doing that, certainly simply for the purpose of getting elected. And Jake, if I have to choose between maintaining a seat in the House of Representatives or protecting the constitutional republic and ensuring the American people know the truth about Donald Trump, I'm going to choose the Constitution and the truth every single day. So, as I said, I'm fighting hard. No matter what happens on August 16th, I'm going to wake up on August 17th and continue to fight hard to ensure Donald Trump is never anywhere close to the Oval Office ever again.
If you end up losing your job in Congress because of your work on this committee, it will have been worth it to you?
There's no question. I believe that my work on this committee is the single most important thing I've ever done professionally.
Listen, I'm not a big fan of her politics, but I'm a big fan of her integrity here. I don't know how Dick Cheney raised a kid like this, but he did. And over the next 2 years, if there's someone who should get that Medal of Freedom around her neck, it's Liz Cheney. It's not Mike Pence. Mike Pence did only what was expected of him. This wasn't expected of Liz Cheney. And, she's 30 points behind. But look what she's running against. This was the debate in Wyoming for her seat in the House of Representatives. Take a look at this.
What we call a lightning round.
January 6th
was a setup from the beginning. We cannot have actual, anyway.
What we saw happen on January 6th was clearly an attempt to delay the count of the electoral votes.
Coronavirus vaccine policy.
They knew Fauci had awards for his work in cytokines.
Mr. Fauci is one of the most corrupt individuals in Washington, D.C. We are to oppose any vaccines.
Everybody ought to get vaccinated, and we need to do everything we can to protect ourselves from future viruses.
Wyoming residents' faith in the election process.
I understand when I talked to Mike Lindell, he did say that there was a small portion of voter fraud in this state, but that is alarming.
What about Facebook using the system to steer people? We know for a fact all the major internets do that.
The 2000 Mules movie is something that I think we have great concern about.
Voting machines that, are suspected fraud.
There are politicians in this country, beginning with Donald Trump, who have lied to the American people. He consistently has said that the election was stolen when it wasn't.
Ukraine is corrupt. We started it. We got involved. We pushed them into being against the Russian government.
Money laundering. I think that's the biggest ticket for Ukraine's and the Biden administration.
It's the front line in the battle for freedom. And I think we've got to elect serious leaders.
Oh my God, that was not Saturday Night Live. That's Wyoming PBS. That was the debate.
That's unbelievable. I'm not a member of either of the parties
right
that are running this country, but that's unbelievable.
And
Those are
she's
some stupid people.
And she's going to lose. She's down by 30 points.
Not surprising.
Oh my God. I guess your integrity is your own reward. But I remember in the lead up to the Iraq War, I mean, there are two times in my later life that I just thought this country was a victim of mass delusion, that it had just gone insane. And one of them, of course, is during this Trump era. But the other one was the lead up to the Iraq War. I mean, the New York Post took the heads off of the French and German ambassadors and put weasels on top of them, weasel heads, and called them weasels. I said, we changed the name of French fries. I mean, actually, Congress did it. They changed the name of French fries to freedom fries. And every day it was something else. The WMD is buried in the desert. It's in the palaces. It's on a ship sailing, or a ghost ship sailing around the Indian Sea. It was insane, as it is now. And I worked on a conservative station where I was right after Rush Limbaugh, Sean Hannity, Michael Savage was on next to me. At one point, I was paired up with Monica Crowley, who was in the Trump administration for about 5 minutes until they found out she was a plagiarist. So, at that time, I was trying to figure out what was going on. It seemed like the whole country had gone crazy. I saw a thing after this all had happened, and we found nothing there. Lawrence Wilkerson, Lieutenant Colonel Lawrence Wilkerson, who was the second in command to Colin Powell, he was asked, well, why didn't anybody speak out? And Lawrence Wilkerson said, you had to be willing to lose your job. And nobody wanted to lose their job. And sometimes, I mean, look at Liz Cheney. She's willing to lose her job. Now, every day I would spend 5-6 hours a day pouring through the foreign press, pouring through things that the mainstream media wasn't exactly following. I looked at the Cato Institute. In fact, most of the time when I found good information, it came from libertarian sources. There was something called antiwar.com run by Justin Raimondo, who was a libertarian, where he put together all the different pieces of intelligence and what we knew, but the things that weren't necessarily being reported. I mean, heck, Liz Cheney's father said Mohammed Atta was in Prague meeting with Iraqi intelligence, just like Trump. His own FBI and CIA told him that Mohammed Atta's phone was pinging in Virginia Beach at the time this was supposed to happen. and that there was no evidence at all that Atta was in Prague. There were no tickets. There was no passport. There was nothing, no pictures, nothing. But Cheney just threw it onto the bonfire, of warmongering. All right, so I'm at the station, and every day, I'm not calling people names. Lynn Samuels, who called the administration Nazis, she was fired. She called them Nazis. Reverend Byron Schaefer, who was on Religion Online, he was a peacenik, and he was with a warmongering rabbi and a warmongering Catholic priest, and he would come on preaching peace. They fired him. Donahue was fired from MSNBC after a private analysis said, if you keep Phil Donahue on the air, you're going to be labeled un-American. My father called me and said, can't you be for the war a little bit? You're going to be fired. I said, Dad, that's not the kind of kid you raised. Friends told me, we're going to go there and we're going to find WMD. And, Sean Hannity says we're going to find so much WMD, it's going to make your head swim. And everything will be fine, but you've got to hold on to your job. You cannot do what you're doing. One day I came into the office and I saw the general manager, who is a guy I like and is a friend of mine, and he was passing this out to all the hosts that were on WABC radio. And when I walked up, I said, what are you giving out there? He hid them. He pushed them away. And I said, come on, Tim, what do you got there? And he goes, look, I don't want to embarrass you. And I said, let me just see what it is. And this is what it was. And I said to him, wait, I work at WABC. That's my station. I'm an American citizen. That's my flag. And I support the troops. I don't want them to be sent overseas to die and be maimed based upon a lie. I'll take one of those. And I've kept it all these years to remind myself that sometimes, yes, you have to suffer the consequences if you want to maintain your integrity, your soul, whatever, your identity. All right. So when that all happened, I was warned. I thought, maybe it might happen to me. It had happened to Lynn. It had happened to the Reverend. It had happened to Donahue. Even callers were telling me, you keep this up and you're going to be fired. Listen to this.
One thing, the people that really right now are behind this war and behind this president as much as they are, that you really kind of get under their skin and have them rush to the phone, is when you make statements that kind of boost the morale of our enemy in a sense of saying that this is not a moral war, like you agreed with that guy
The
before.
Pope said that. The Pope said that. Is he on the enemy? Is he on the side of Saddam Hussein, the Pope? He's asking Catholics across the world to fast for peace next Wednesday.
Yeah,
is he a dupe of his communist masters? He's a guy that fought the communists.
When in the history of the world has the Pope ever said go to war? Never. Never historically speaking. And you're a historian in some sense because you're very well read.
The Pope has said go to war in the past, so historically they have said it, and there is a moral justification for what they call a just war. And the American Council of Bishops say that this preemptive unilateral war does not meet the standards by which they evaluate a just war. So you're entirely incorrect, my friend.
I don't think that it's fair to call you a traitor, as some people have, because I think that some of your opinions...
Don't make me laugh. Don't make me laugh by calling me a traitor, because I don't
think it's fair to call you a traitor.
It's not only fair. No, it's not. It's not that it's not fair. It is laughable, and it is un-American.
Sometimes you really do sound un-American, Richard, and I don't...
All right, well, wait a second. Give me an instance where I am anti...
Listen, start taping the program and listen.
No, you're the one... I don't have to listen to the program. I speak the words, my friend. You tell me if you say...
when you go to the movies.
If you say at times that I sound un-American, and I ask you what those times are, it is not my responsibility to find out when I sound un-American, because it is my opinion that I am a patriotic American.
They own the airwaves. You will not be around for, I guarantee, in 6 months, once your contract up, you will not be renewed. I guarantee it. Totally guaranteed.
They could fire me before then. I'm always here at the pleasure.
And I won't be at all surprised if you get fired before then. But your contract will not, I repeat, will not be renewed.
All right. If I do, I will get a soapbox and stand in Central Park and use my constitutional rights to speak out.
Or I will get a podcast and do it every Monday. Actually, I was fired less than a month later after that prediction. But you want to know something? I would do it again. All right. So let's move on to somebody else who is a different example, an example of a guy who has no integrity, Josh Hawley, who's become a laughingstock. Today, the two major papers in his state have said he should either resign or he isn't worthy of being in Congress. During the January 6th committee hearings, you've all seen it, the picture of Josh Hawley in front of the mob rushing to the Capitol with his fist in the air, urging them on, from a safe space behind the Capitol Police. But once his people, right on, got through, Josh Hawley booked out of that Capitol. He ran like, I don't know. He ran like he was not in a marathon, because you'd run more slowly. He ran like Forrest Gump. He just went straight out. Jesse Owens, that's what he ran like. And they showed this at the January 6th committee hearings, the contrast between the bully boy cheering on the crowd and the little coward that ran out of the Capitol as his people smashed windows, defecated on floors, hit cops with bear spray and poles. Little Josh just ran. Now, you've probably seen that video, but what you probably didn't see was that the audience at the January 6th committee hearing burst out in laughter. I mean, this was news to me. Take a look at this. Nope, wrong thing. That's coming up.
That day, Senator Hawley fled after those protesters he helped to rile up stormed the Capitol. See for yourself.
Whoa, gotta get out of here. Hey. All right. So they somehow, when I watched it live, I didn't see everybody laughing at him. But then this guy, and this just happened, what was it, a few days ago. He was speaking at the Trump Turning Point conference, and he put on his commando black T-shirt and talked tough again, saying, I guess he has no sense of irony. He says, I will not run from liberals. He'll run from his own people. Take a look at this.
I objected on January 6th last year to the state of Pennsylvania. And I just want to say to all of those liberals out there in the liberal media, just in case you haven't gotten the message yet, I do not regret it. And I am not backing down. I'm not going to apologize. I'm not going to cower. I'm not going to run from you. I'm not going to bend the knee.
No, he's not going to run. He just run. And who shows up to make a speech at a conference wearing a commando muscle T-shirt like that? You know, come on. We know how tough you are. Everybody was laughing at you. Now, let me ask you something, because what would have happened if Josh Hawley had really been a hero and he said, somebody give me a bullhorn? I mean, they like Josh Hawley. They like Ted Cruz. What if the two of them had gone out with a bullhorn and said, all right, step back. This is over. Step out. We support you. We will vote against certification, but you have to leave the Capitol building now. What if they had gone out into the crowd? It's not like they were Nancy Pelosi or Mike Pence who they wanted to hang or do something worse to. I mean, would the crowd have listened to them if they had had the guts to stand up? Oh, he's such a tough guy now. I'm not going to back down to the liberal press. You didn't have the guts on January 6th to stand up and do something, though, did you? Here's another thing. I was in New York. I was with my friend Jay Diamond, Scott Pellegrino, and I said, what do you think would happen if Trump had actually gone to the Capitol? If the Secret Service had said, okay, we're driving you there. What if Trump had been on the Capitol steps with the crowd and they start to push forward? Trump wouldn't have stopped them. Do you think? What if Trump had actually gone in to the Capitol building with the crowd to stop the certification? What would have happened? I have one friend who said, well, they would have called in the army and they would have all been massacred. I don't think so. But just think about it. That would make some graphic novel. Albert, what do you think would have happened if Trump went up there and marched with the crowd into the Capitol? What do you think would have happened?
I think they'd have been more successful.
Yeah.
The rioters.
You mean stopping the count, the count of the Electoral College? Is that what you mean?
Not necessarily stopping the count, but creating more havoc.
Yeah, I know, and there'd be no opposition to them?
No, I don't think so.
Right.
There was opposition that didn't work then, so why would the president change that?
All right. But still, it's something to think about because that's what he wanted to do. He wanted to be with them up there. All right. We can only imagine what would have happened if Josh Hawley or Trump or somebody else had actually, well, Trump wasn't going to tell them to stand out. I mean, one of the things they're saying is he sat there for, almost 3 hours just watching TV and, like he was at the movie theater eating popcorn, watching Top Gun, he enjoyed it. All right. So the other day, I told you there's two periods of time in this country where I thought the nation has gone crazy. And one was in the lead up to the Iraq War. We were all traumatized by 9/11. There was some kind of excuse for that. And the other day, there was somebody in this building, one of my neighbors, and we started talking, and we've always been friendly. And she started to go on about, I told her about, Florida has 3 times the number of deaths as New York State, even though the population of New York State is a bit larger, but not that much larger. And that, there was a variant now that was even more transmissible. And she said, I didn't want to get the vaccine. Do you know with those mRNA vaccines, they change your DNA? I said, no, they don't change. She said, and you're believing those numbers? The doctors get paid more when they write down COVID. I said, that's a talking point from the Laura Ingraham show from 2020. I said, first of all, the doctors weren't getting it. It was the hospital that would get a bonus because we were buried under an avalanche of patients at that time, and we didn't have the respirators or anything. Anyway, but talking to her, the election was I mean, what can you say? What can you say? Well, on my TV show, and I wish I had the whole program, but I had these people, they were all extremely gorgeous specimens. The women looked like high fashion models. The men looked like they just stepped off the set of Baywatch. And they all believed that they had walked into these bodies from the planet Arcturus. And their leader was this guy, Frederick von Mierers, who looked like a David Bowie out of The Man Who Fell to Earth. And all of these kids, these gorgeous looking kids, went to Ivy League colleges. They had the best. They went to Stanford. They went to Harvard. They went to Yale. They went to Princeton. And most of them came from wealthy families. Two of them were high fashion models who gave this man their jewelry that they owned because he said they were magic jewels that could put out better vibes. I mean, one of the girls in the audience who was just a knockout. At one point, I leaned over to her and said, if you go back to that planet, I said, can you book a seat for me? Make it a +1. I'd like to go back with you. But anyway, this was Frederick. And if you look in the audience, when I'm in the audience, you can tell which members in the audience are his followers because they are just strikingly attractive people. But this was the people who came, they walked into human bodies from the planet Arcturus. Take a look.
Where we had members of a group that claimed to be from the planet Arcturus. They all happened to be blonde-haired and blue-eyed, come from very wealthy families, and gone to Ivy League universities. Strange aliens among us. This is what they had to tell us on the January 20th, 1988 program of People Are Talking. On Arcturus, but you don't have one in Secaucus.
To whom? To whom do the changing thoughts that you're presenting to this audience appear, Richard? This is phenomenalism.
Are manners known on Arcturus?
Americans, you are being...
Frederick?
You're going into the most crucial period of Earth history, starting in May of next year. The terrible earthquakes, the storms that will beset humanity, the financial disasters. We must warn you. We're here to warn you of these things. We are sincere.
Okay, so you're saying next year...
Not phenomenalism and five and dime store stupidities, Richard. I talked to you behind the scenes about this.
I did talk to you behind the scenes, too. And you know what I think?
Yes, Richard.
Now, for the first time in the course of this interview, you are looking me in the eyes. And what you told me is, don't believe people who don't look you in the eyes. During the course of this interview, you have not looked me in the eyes. You've tried to project to the audience here.
I'm talking to them.
You want to know what I really think? I think you found some young, impressionable people who are on a quest for spiritual, moral values.
This is all fine. Richard?
And there may be...
This is all fine. This is fine. Brilliant, Richard.
What I believe is that I've afforded you every courtesy on this show.
Have manners. You'll never be a Ted Koppel unless you have manners. Well, you will always be what you are.
You know what? You'll never be a David Bowie unless you get a best story. We're going to take a break right now. We'll be right back in just a moment. Stay with us.
How could they believe that? Actually, Marie Brenner, who is one of the most acclaimed magazine writers, wrote a piece on it in Vanity Fair, and she mentioned my interview with him, and she quoted it, actually, and we have a picture of that, I think, of that issue. There she is with, I mean, that guy's a weird-looking guy. And then 2 years later, it was reported in the New York Post that they think he died, although they didn't make an exact... at that point, an exact identification of the body. So they were worried that he might have just scammed them. Maybe he'd gone back to Arcturus. I don't know. There he is. Death of yuppie sex guru. But, you know, he had a group of about 100 kids. Wealthy. They weren't like the people at Jonestown who were pretty much working class people. Well-educated, Ivy League colleges. I mean, some of these guys, I mean, even, what's his name? Josh Hawley and Ted Cruz. They're Ivy League college graduates. I mean, the other guy, the cornpone, John Kennedy from Louisiana, he went to Cambridge or Oxford, you know? And yet, you know, I don't think they believe half of what they say, but there you go. People fall into a occult frame of knowledge, and it's hard to break out of it. Now, as I say goodbye, let me just leave you with two things. It was my birthday this week. Ralph Nader said, the only true aging is the erosion of our ideals. And this one can remain alive long past the usual date of disintegration if one is unafraid of change, insatiable to intellectual curiosity, interested in big things, and happy in small ways. Those are Edith Wharton's words. They're a lot easier to digest than my mother's. Don't get old, Richard. Don't get old. Anyway, thank you so much for joining me today. I hope you enjoyed it. And if you like it, subscribe so you'll get it every week. And pass it on to your friends. Post it on your Facebook timeline. And also, you can listen to just the audio on the places where you find audio, Google Podcast, Apple Podcast. And as always, from us here to you out there, all our best. Take care.